Good morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. I am your host, Richard Charpentier, owner and founder of Baking Innovation, a product development group helping bakeries with tomorrow's solutions. So, welcome back from last week. There was no Tuesday 10 at 10. We were busy at the IBIA convention in Las Vegas. What a great show, and meeting great friends and old friends as well and new friends. So for those who attended, I'm sure you had a great time seeing all the new technology and the new products and offerings that were on display at the show. But for those who don't know, every Tuesday, 10 at 10, we meet for 10 minutes and try to answer as many questions sent from the bakers, and I'll try to give you as much insight on the questions that were sent. So the first question is, someone is asking, they're formulating a recipe using baker's percent. If I have 60 grams of oil and 50 grams of honey, should I count them under the water percentage? So on baker's percent, it's everything done where flour counts at 100%. So if you have 1,000 pounds, 100 pounds, and any percent will be calculated based on the amount of flour you have versus the total formula percent, which totals everything and breaks down how much in percent. So there's a big difference, but now we're talking about baker's percent. So if you're using 60 grams of oil, oil is always counted as fat, not water. Even though when you're using an oil in a bread or in a cake batter versus a more solid fat like a palm shortening or a butter, which is solid at room temperature, of course, unless it's really hot and it'll start melting, it's counted as fat. But if you're looking into fat, and I mentioned butter, it does contain a certain amount of water. So if you have water in your fat, I will count that as water. And if in the case of the honey, when you're using honey and any ingredients containing water, which honey contains about 25% of moisture, I will count that as water. Remember, it's really important to do so as you're building a product and also for shelf life extension. A lot of the issues with shelf life extensions comes down to water activity, moisture. So anytime you're adding ingredients that will soften your product, such as a honey, because it's liquid, might be easier to pour as compared to a granulated sugar. So all of those things will have an impact on your texture, shelf life, sometimes the volume. If you have too much water, you might lose some of the volume because you need the structure to build it. But in your case, no, they will not count as water. And you have to ensure anytime you change from a solid fat, meaning, like a palm shortening, which is solid, you can grab it in your hand, versus an oil, which is pourable and liquid. So it's a change of viscosity. You have to see how those changes affect your dough texture and your dough rheology within your process. And everything works, but you remember, fat is fat, they have different flavor, and sugar is sugar, but start thinking of the amount of water in your products that you're using, because like I said, butter it's sometimes not just fat. So if you don't know where to find it, I would go ask in the specification, or sometimes look online, say how much water is in, and you will find an answer, and then you can start calculating or backtracking and figuring out, okay, I'm adding water from that ingredient. I hope it answered your question. So, and thank you for sending it. So now for today, we have another question. It's on we're a bread company making roughly 80,000 loaves per day. And we're experiencing a lot of water droplets on the roof. The bread comes out of the oven and stands in an open room under the leaking roof. Will fans help us remove the water droplets from the roof? Well, it's a great question, and it's a great, everyday problem for bakers. So remember, for shelf life of products and bread in general, bakery products, we're looking at mold growth and staling. Mold comes from the environment and by having extra moisture. So anything right now happening to your loaves of bread and having water, extra water coming from the roof, dripping on your cooling bread is a potential risk for waste in your bakery. Adding fan is only going to partially dry up the water that is on the surface, but you can dry it all. So, and if you have a roof that is full of mold and exposed to, dust and everything, most likely containing mold, yeast, or bacteria within the water. So therefore, tainting your breads and any breads that you produce or any bread that you make is technically sterile coming outside of the oven, unless, of course, as long as you reach the proper internal temperature of baking of about 200 Fahrenheit. And if you do so, what you do after coming out of the oven, which is when your bread is sterile, is basically the value of your bread in the shelf life. If you're putting your bread under a dripping, leaky roof, you're basically wasting a lot of the production you're working very hard to make, and now letting the environment in your bakery do so. There's a lot of things that could be done, but that's one thing I would really fix the roof immediately. And because shelf life of good quality bread cannot be wasted because of faulty processes, because you've done all the work first and then you have that problem. So I hope it helps. There is nothing that I can from the conversation do, but this is something that would need to be fixed, and the fans and drying will not help out. And there are other solutions, but I would start thinking of first thing is fixing the leaky roof to avoid potential waste and problems, because we've done all the hard work already making the bread, so let's make sure the bread stays good. So that is it for today. It was only 2 questions, so please continue sending your questions to Bakerpedia, and we'll be more than happy to answer it on every Tuesday at Tuesday 10 at 10. Thank you again. I'm your host, Richard Charpentier, and I will see you next week for more questions and answers. Thank you.